Ms. Lena Carter exited the opulent sedan and walked purposefully toward the Blackwood family's magnificent manor. Dressed in her perfectly tailored azure suit, she exuded both grace and commanding presence. As the chief executive officer of a renowned technology conglomerate, she had arrived to finalize a $900 million transaction, one that could redefine her company's trajectory and solidify a partnership with one of the most ancient, influential dynasties of wealth and privilege. The moment Lena appeared at the grand entrance, every gaze in the room fixed upon her. Whispered murmurs rippled through the gathering like an unseen current. A woman adorned with a pearl necklace looked up with thinly veiled disdain, her lips curling into a cold smile. At that very instant, Mr. Julian Blackwood, the sole successor to the family empire, raised his champagne flute, and his voice, dripping with biting sarcasm, called out, "Did someone mistakenly usher in the domestic staff ahead of schedule?" Awkward laughter erupted around the banquet hall. Lena froze for a heartbeat, her spirit stung by the unexpected slight, but she swiftly regained her composure. No one moved to advocate for her, not even Mr. Reginald Blackwood, the venerable patriarch of the family. With a polite smile, she excused herself from the table, even though her dessert had not yet been served. Word of the $900 million alliance between Lena's tech firm and the Blackwood empire spread like wildfire through the business community. To many, it represented a historic milestone for both parties. But for Lena, it signified a deeply personal triumph, a testament to years of shattering unseen barriers, overcoming ingrained prejudice, and prevailing in brutal negotiations. She was more than just a CEO. She personified hope for everyone who had ever been disregarded, silenced, or undervalued. As the golden sunset bathed the estate in warm light, the Blackwood Manor gleamed like a precious jewel on the hillside. A line of sparkling supercars adorned the driveway, and crystal chandeliers shimmered behind the mansion's intricate windows, clear emblems of the Blackwoods' unparalleled might and prosperity. From the sleek black vehicle, Lena descended once more, her tailored navy jacket accentuating her poise and natural elegance. The distinct click of her stiletto heels on the marble steps was steady and deliberate, each stride an unstated declaration of the status she had painstakingly acquired. Her luminous dark skin and the neat updo of her coiled hair conveyed a rare confidence. In her eyes shone a singular, quiet message. She was not merely present as a guest, but as the holder of the key to a deal that could reshape the technological landscape. Crossing the threshold into the grand hall, she passed through towering doors adorned with elaborate floral carvings. Conversations hushed to discreet whispers. A few faces showed genuine admiration. Others betrayed surprise and apprehension. Few had anticipated that the acclaimed CEO of a top-tier tech firm, so widely heralded in the press, would prove to be such a young black woman. Lena, however, remained unruffled. She offered a calm, polite smile, her gaze sweeping the room with quiet determination, an unspoken reminder that her worth lay not in idle gossip or others' preconceived notions, but in her demonstrated skill, integrity, and vision. In the distant corner, Julian Blackwood observed her with a calculating smirk, curiosity and skepticism flickering in his eyes. Lena advanced toward Reginald Blackwood, the family's leader, and extended her hand to greet him, only to have a haughty voice ring out, slicing through the elegantly charged atmosphere at that very moment. Did someone inadvertently allow the domestic help to enter too early? The chill in his voice cut through the silence like a sharp blade. Every head turned instantly to the speaker. Julian Blackwood, the only son and cherished heir of the Blackwood family's billion-dollar empire. Julian stood beside the long table, draped in pristine white silk, one hand raising his gleaming champagne flute. His gaze was cold and self-satisfied. Crystals from the chandelier cast shifting shadows across his sharp features, lending an eerie depth to his eyes, simultaneously captivating and frosty. The smirk on his lips held no genuine warmth, only disdain cloaked in a veneer of civility. At that moment, time seemed to stand still. Every conversation ceased, leaving only the soft strains of background music to underscore the escalating tension. The guests glanced at each other. A few forced nervous laughs broke the stillness, attempts to mask their discomfort with polite facades. Those hollow chuckles felt like 100 tiny needles to Lena's heart. A woman accustomed to commanding the grandest stages, leading thousands of employees, and conquering countless brutal challenges now found herself publicly humiliated before dozens of strangers. Her chest tightened, her face flushed with anger and shame, but Lena maintained flawless composure. Not far away, Reginald Blackwood, respected patriarch and head of the family, stood silently. He did not intervene. His eyes flickered with uncertainty, perhaps concerned for the family's reputation or unwilling to contradict his son in front of distinguished guests. Reginald's silence was a bitter acquiescence, magnifying Lena's pain and isolation. Amidst the storm of her emotions, Lena held her posture tall and met Julian's gaze with quiet steadiness. No words were exchanged, yet her powerful silence conveyed profound disdain for his crude insult. She knew she represented not just herself, but everyone ever belittled or discriminated against in the same manner. Julian raised his champagne glass a little higher, reveling in her reaction. Clearly, this was not his first act of arrogance. Raised in privilege, he'd inherited every advantage but not a shred of basic empathy. His taunt was merely the latest proof of how money and status had corrupted him. The tension remained suffocating. Lena's eyes swept the room one last time. She caught sight of several younger guests bowing their heads, avoiding her gaze. They understood what had just occurred but lacked the courage to speak up or even show a sliver of solidarity. Then, with a dignified smile, Lena gave Reginald a graceful nod, a final courteous farewell, and turned to depart. Her heels clicked confidently on the marble floor, louder and more assured than ever. She exited the room with her head held high, even as Julian Blackwood's challenging, satisfied stare followed her out. What Julian didn't realize was that his thoughtless affront wouldn't just wound Lena. It would ignite a battle he himself had unwittingly initiated. And in that fight, the arrogant often end up paying the steepest price. The distinct click of Lena's heels on the marble floor resonated like the steady beat of a triumphant anthem, shattering the suffocating tension Julian Blackwood had just created. Guests tracked her every step, their eyes flickering with a mix of astonishment and restrained admiration for the astonishing calm she maintained in the face of public humiliation. When Lena paused at the grand doors of the hall, she turned once more to survey the room. The faint smile on her lips conveyed neither weakness nor bitterness. Instead, it spoke volumes. No matter how unjustly she was treated, she remained utterly in control of herself. Julian caught that smile, and for a moment his champagne flute quivered in his hand despite his best effort to appear unfazed. Nearby, Reginald Blackwood, Julian's father and the esteemed patriarch, stood motionless, his expression unreadable. He watched Lena depart without uttering a word. His silence was a cruel endorsement of his son's contempt. Reginald knew full well the fallout of the evening's insult, yet his pride as the head of the Blackwood name would not permit him to object in front of their distinguished guests. In choosing his family's reputation over justice, he became complicit in the pain inflicted upon an innocent woman. Julian, after a brief flicker of surprise at Lena's dignified response, quickly reassumed his indifferent composure. He offered a casual chuckle, as if her departure were no more than a minor power play, a reminder of the dominance he believed himself entitled to. He was accustomed to obedience, to having mistakes brushed away by his father's name and wealth. To Julian, Lena was simply an inconvenient yet disposable victim. Yet, beneath his bravado, Julian felt an unsettling ripple of doubt. He had humiliated many before, but none had departed with such poise and quiet dignity. Lena's steady gaze and final proud smile left a small crack in his confidence, a seed of uncertainty about the strength and authority he so prized. Though he would never admit it, her reaction struck at the fragile core of his vanity. Outside the Blackwood estate, the cool night air washed away the heat on Lena's cheeks. A gentle breeze stirred loose strands of her hair as she stood tall, drawing in a deep, steadying breath. In that moment, she felt the full weight of the battle she fought every day. Against bias, against prejudice, against the unseen injustices of society. A young attendant bowed respectfully at the gate. Lena returned a gracious nod, an unspoken thank you. She knew true strength wasn't measured by sharp retorts or explosive confrontations, but by unwavering self-respect and resolve. Even when the world seemed poised to crush her, she slid into her black sedan and closed the door softly. The car pulled away from the glittering mansion, leaving behind the blinding lights and opulent sounds of the party, but also the first fractures in the Blackwood family's foundation of power. Lena understood this was only the beginning. She would not be silenced. Rather than engage in petty revenge, she would wield her integrity and skill to secure the ultimate triumph. Inside the hall, Julian Blackwood raised his champagne glass with practiced ease, determined to suppress the uneasy flutter in his chest. He could not yet perceive that Lena Carter's composed defiance had set in motion a reckoning far more costly than anything he had ever imagined. The sedan glided quietly through the gates of the Blackwood estate, fading into the darkness of the deserted streets. Lena leaned back in her seat, her eyes half closed, but her mind racing. She had believed that calm and composure would feel like victory when she left the party, but instead she now faced an intense, tension-filled inner battle. As soon as she stepped into her downtown apartment, her phone buzzed with an urgent message from the board chair. "We need to talk right now. It's very serious." A single line, yet enough to show that tonight's fallout was already spreading and would not be easily contained. Lena sat by the large window, watching the city lights flicker in the distance. Her phone kept lighting up with messages from board members, worried, anxious, all urging her to return to the table and salvage the $900 million deal they believed could transform the company's future. But Lena knew that returning meant bowing to the humiliation Julian Blackwood had inflicted. Her heart wouldn't allow it. The night wore on, but sleep wouldn't come. The room lay in darkness and absolute silence, a stark contrast to the turmoil in her mind. Memories of wounds she'd hidden for years surged back, vivid and painful, as if they'd happened only yesterday. She remembered her first day at a prestigious university among students from affluent families, the contemptuous glances, the whispered cruel remarks behind her back, the stifled giggles as she walked the long corridors. All still echoed in her mind. Back then, she vowed never to let anyone belittle her again. She would prove that skin tone and background could never define a person's worth. Those memories mingled with Julian Blackwood's arrogant face from tonight, fortifying her resolve. Yet her heart ached whenever she recalled Reginald Blackwood's look, the gaze of a father who refused to champion what was right, silently watching his son humiliate another to preserve the family's hollow honor. Lena wondered, was the might of money and status truly worth more than self-respect and dignity? Her phone lit up again, this time a call from Ms. Naomi Bell, her close friend and the company's vice president. Lena hesitated, then answered. "Lena, the board is on edge. Some members desire an emergency vote to reverse our decision. They claim we cannot afford to forfeit such a massive investment." Naomi's voice wavered with concern. "Naomi, I comprehend," Lena replied calmly, though her chest tightened. "But if I surrender now, everything we've constructed, our ethics, our integrity, the honor of this company, will signify nothing." "I know," Naomi said hesitantly. "But are you certain this is the optimal course? Sometimes one must endure a degree of hardship to achieve something greater." Lena shook her head slightly, her voice soft but resolute. "No, Naomi, not this time. No one possesses the right to exchange dignity for money, whether it's $900 million or more." When the call concluded, Lena sank back into her chair, exhaustion pressing down on her shoulders. Outside, dawn was breaking, dispelling the darkness but unable to soothe her inner turmoil. The sleepless night had been one of the longest of her life, yet it would also determine her destiny and that of the company. Deep down, Lena knew this choice would bring enormous challenges and hardships, but she also understood that sometimes the most arduous decisions are the righteous ones, choices she would never regret. Meanwhile, in the opulent Blackwood mansion, Julian Blackwood also spent the night awake. Unlike Lena, his restlessness didn't stem from moral conviction, but from a vague unease and growing uncertainty. For the first time, Julian realized that his power and wealth could not procure everything, and that realization angered him more than ever. The first rays of dawn filtered through the floor-to-ceiling glass, illuminating Lena's steadfast expression. A sleepless night had left her weary, but it had also crystallized her resolve more clearly than ever. For her, there was no alternative but to confront every challenge head-on. At precisely 7 a.m., Lena entered the company's grand boardroom, where the board of directors and senior executives were already assembled. Each face reflected anxiety and doubt. The atmosphere was taut, every breath seeming heavier than the last. Lena stood before them, her gaze sweeping slowly across familiar faces. In that moment, she realized how many had lost their conviction, how easily they were willing to yield to the material allure of a $900 million deal. They had forgotten that the values they championed mattered more than money. Her calm, clear voice broke the oppressive silence. "I know you all understand what transpired last night at the Blackwood estate, and I know this $900 million partnership is a tremendous opportunity. But I cannot and will not sacrifice our dignity and principles for money." The room immediately erupted. Mr. David Lane, the CFO, sprang to his feet, his tone sharp with frustration. "Lena, you cannot make that decision unilaterally. This directly impacts the company's survival." Lena remained perfectly composed, her eyes unwavering on David. "David, I appreciate your concern, but the reason this company has thrived is because we never compromise on justice or respect for others. Partnering with the Blackwoods now would betray the very values we've built." "That's purely personal emotion," interjected Ms. Karen Miller, a veteran board member. "We cannot permit impulse to squander such a massive opportunity. A brief apology from the Blackwoods would be more than sufficient." "This is a $900 million deal, Lena." Lena exhaled softly. Karen was correct about the business aspect but mistaken on ethics. She gave a firm shake of her head. "This isn't about feelings, Karen. It's about respect and integrity. A perfunctory apology won't undo the public humiliation we endured." David's brow furrowed, his voice edged with worry. "If we withdraw, our share price will plummet. How do you intend to justify that to our shareholders?" "I'll inform them we do not conduct business with cowardice," Lena replied instantly, her voice steely. "We conduct business with honor and integrity. That is what will sustain and grow this company." The boardroom fell silent once more, but this time it was a silence of contemplation. Even those who disagreed felt the power of Lena's words. Elsewhere in his private office, Julian Blackwood watched the unfolding crisis on his phone with a smirk. He reveled in the board's turmoil, confident Lena would soon yield under internal pressure. To him, this game was already won. What he failed to perceive was that his own overconfidence blinded him to one truth. Lena Carter was no easy target. Back in the boardroom, Lena looked each person in the eye. "I'm not requesting unanimous agreement, but as the leader of this company, I am officially withdrawing from the Blackwood deal, and I accept full responsibility for any fallout." Her clear, forceful declaration silenced the room. Everyone recognized it wasn't just a personal statement. It was the stance of a woman prepared to defend her and her company's honor at any cost. Lena turned and exited the boardroom, leaving behind a charged stillness and a shaken leadership. She knew today's decision would unleash storms of controversy, but it was a choice she would never regret. And in her heart, Lena understood that her toughest battle was only just beginning. Just hours after leaving the tense board meeting, Lena Carter stood confidently at the podium in a vast hall, facing hundreds of reporters and media representatives. Flashbulbs popped incessantly as curious, expectant eyes fixed on her, awaiting an official explanation for the decision that was rocking the business world. Lena wore a simple yet powerful white suit, her hair pulled into a neat chignon, her eyes unwavering with resolve. A hush descended over the room as she stepped up to the microphone, leaning in slightly as if about to deliver the most crucial statement of her life. "My dignity is not for sale at any price," she began, her voice clear and strong. "I am officially withdrawing from the $900 million partnership with the Blackwood Corporation." The room erupted in stunned chatter and rapid-fire questions. Reporters jostled to get the microphone first, desperate for more details on this shocking reversal. "Ms. Carter, are you concerned about negative reactions from your shareholders?" asked a senior journalist, skepticism etched on his face. Lena replied calmly but firmly, "I believe our shareholders understand our core values. We cannot build our future on deals that compromise our honor and integrity." "But ma'am, isn't this decision overly emotional? Some say you're allowing personal feelings to override the company's best interests," pressed a young female reporter. Lena met her gaze without flinching. "If defending one's self-respect and dignity is termed emotional, then yes, I am acting on emotion. But I firmly believe that in business and in life, certain principles must never be broken, no matter the justification." Backstage, Naomi Bell, Lena's close friend and the company's vice president, watched with a mixture of concern and pride. She knew Lena was doing what few leaders dared, standing up for principle in a world where profit always takes precedence. Meanwhile, in the grand office of the Blackwood mansion, Julian Blackwood watched the press conference live, his face hardening with rage and unexpected anxiety. Lena's bold statement struck at the very core of his pride, making him realize for the first time that his presumed control was slipping. "She truly proceeded with it?" he muttered, anger rising. He was accustomed to people yielding to the Blackwood name, but Lena Carter had caught him completely off guard. Back on stage, the press conference continued to crackle with tension as reporters lobbed piercing questions about prejudice, discrimination, and ethics in major corporations. Lena answered each one with calm intelligence, making it clear that her decision was not a hasty impulse, but the product of a profound struggle with her deepest values. A renowned anchor from a major network posed the final question in a sincere tone. "Ms. Carter, what message would you like to convey to young entrepreneurs, especially those facing discrimination and pressure from powerful interests like the Blackwood family?" Lena looked directly into the camera, her voice dropping to a resonant conviction. "My message is this. No one has the right to define your worth by your race, gender, or background. True success isn't measured by how much money you acquire, but by how much dignity and integrity you preserve in the face of challenge and pressure." Her words spread instantly, dominating news coverage and igniting social media with millions of shares praising her courage and uncompromising stance. On stage, Lena remained unwavering, her expression unshaken. She knew storms still lay ahead, but in this moment, she understood more clearly than ever. It's not about evading the storm, but possessing the strength to face it and emerge with your self-respect and core values intact. Just hours after Lena's powerful declaration still dominated the headlines and reverberated through the business community, an unexpected twist, one Julian Blackwood never foresaw, completely disrupted the confrontation. That very night, as Julian scrambled to extinguish the initial flames of the crisis, his phone buzzed non-stop with alerts. A short video, barely 2 minutes long, was being shared at lightning speed, amassing millions of views within hours. Heart-pounding, Julian hit play and watched himself standing in that opulent ballroom, champagne flute in hand, arrogantly sneering. Did someone mistakenly usher in the domestic staff ahead of schedule? The footage, shot discreetly, most likely on a server's phone, captured the exact moment of his insult. Someone he'd never noticed, an invisible bystander in his eyes, now held the proof that would shake the Blackwood empire to its core. Within hours, the clip had gone viral, flooded with scathing criticism. The hashtag dignity is priceless trended across every major social platform, fueled by public outrage. Social media users denounced Julian's arrogance and racial bias, demanding a public apology from the Blackwoods and even calling for a boycott of all the family's businesses. At Blackwood headquarters, pandemonium erupted. The communications team was besieged by calls from the press and major business partners, all demanding an explanation. Blackwood's stock plummeted as institutional investors panicked and sold off shares. In a single night, the wealth and reputation the Blackwoods had built over decades teetered on the brink of collapse. Seated in his expansive office, Julian stared at his phone, first in disbelief, then anger, and finally in fear. How had this transpired? Who had dared betray the Blackwood name? Who dared challenge his absolute authority? In his mind, Julian had never believed himself fallible. Power and privilege were his birthright. He was accustomed to people bowing to him, to every misstep being concealed by his family's influence. Yet now that video laid bare all the hypocrisy he'd carefully hidden for years. Confronted with a torrent of angry comments and viral outrage, Julian felt a gnawing fear of total loss of control. Meanwhile, in her own office, Lena sat reading message after message of support pouring in from around the globe. She knew the video would intensify an already volatile situation, but it was also the strongest proof that her stance wasn't a solitary act, but the voice of countless people who had been belittled and discriminated against. Naomi Bell entered, tablet in hand, her eyes shining as she shared the latest social media metrics. "Lena, it's exploding out there. Millions are on your side. Blackwood Corporation is under unbelievable pressure. I've never witnessed such fierce, unified backlash." Lena nodded thoughtfully, her resolve unshaken. "Naomi, this isn't just about me and Julian anymore. Now we transmit a clear message. Respect and human dignity aren't for sale at any price. That's what I've always believed, and what I will fight to protect." At the Blackwood mansion, Reginald Blackwood hastened into Julian's office, his face a mask of anger and disappointment. "Julian, do you comprehend what you've done? One foolish remark has dragged our entire family into a crisis we've never confronted before." Julian looked up, trying to steady his voice. "Father, I'll regain control of this. I merely require a little more time." "Control?" Reginald cut him off, fury in his tone. "This isn't something money and power can simply sweep under the rug. You've gone too far this time." His father's words struck Julian like a cold splash of water, shattering the pride he'd always taken for granted. For the first time, he realized that wealth and status could vanish in an instant before the combined might of public opinion and the integrity of people like Lena Carter. That night, the social media firestorm showed no signs of abating, and the battle between dignity and material power had truly entered its most decisive, unrelenting phase. As dawn broke over the city skyline, the first light filtered through the thick glass of Julian's office windows, attempting to illuminate the deep cracks in an empire he'd always thought unshakable. After a sleepless, tension-filled night, Julian felt more keenly than ever that his power and status teetered on the brink of collapse. That morning, Blackwood Corporation's share price plunged 18% within the first few hours of trading, unleashing unprecedented chaos on the financial markets. Major investors panicked, dumping stock en masse, while traders frantically reported the dire situation. Never before had the Blackwood name, long regarded as a rock-solid symbol of prestige and influence, appeared so fragile and vulnerable. In the emergency boardroom at the Blackwood estate, Reginald Blackwood stared at the live ticker, showing the share price spiraling downward. His face had gone ashen with worry. Silence gripped the room. No one dared speak. Finally, Reginald turned to Julian, his voice cold but trembling with anger. "Julian, what have you done? This corporation is not your toy to be destroyed by your arrogance and irresponsibility." Julian sat motionless, his gaze distant and frosty. He offered no reply, but in his eyes burned a fierce unease. He'd never before confronted the real-world consequences of his actions. The pride of a man who believed the world revolved around him was crumbling, replaced by a rising tide of fear. That afternoon, the board of directors convened an urgent meeting. Their faces were stern, their anger palpable. To stabilize both image and operations, Chairman Mr. Thomas Reed, a longtime partner and close friend of Reginald, rose and declared, "We have no alternative but to suspend Julian from all leadership duties immediately until a full investigation is complete and public confidence is restored. This is the only viable path forward." Julian's eyes widened in shock, then blazed with outrage and panic. "You cannot do this. This is my family's company." Thomas fixed him with a steely glance, disappointment clear in his tone. "Julian, you brought this crisis upon us with your hubris and lack of accountability. Do not forget who placed us in this predicament." Julian fell silent, bitterness mingling with fury. He'd never imagined the people who'd once deferred to him would ever turn on him so decisively. For the first time in his life, he felt truly out of control. Outside the corporate headquarters, hundreds gathered, waving protest banners. They called for a boycott of all Blackwood products and services, chanting fiercely, "We won't tolerate bigotry. Dignity is priceless." Live images of the demonstration spread across social media, ratcheting up the pressure on the company. Every brand affiliated with Blackwood began issuing statements distancing themselves, canceling advertisements and partnerships. The media labeled it one of the most severe corporate crises in recent history, with all the heat focused squarely on Julian Blackwood, the man who had ignited this scandal. Alone in his vast estate office, Julian stood by the window, watching the turmoil below, his mind in disarray. He could scarcely believe that a thoughtless gesture of his had wrought such catastrophic damage. The walls of power he'd so carefully constructed over years had become meaningless in the face of public opinion and the unwavering dignity of a woman he'd once scoffed at. Reginald entered quietly, his tone somber but calm. "Julian, it's time you face the consequences of your actions. I've always shielded you from your minor mistakes. This time, I can only allow you to bear the responsibility yourself." Julian met his father's gaze, feeling a depth of despair he'd never known. "Father, is there any means to salvage this?" Reginald paused, then slowly shook his head. "Perhaps not too late, but it will be very difficult. You must truly comprehend that genuine power does not emanate from money or status, but from respect, self-respect, and moral integrity. That is the most valuable lesson Lena Carter has taught us." At that same moment, Lena sat in her office, gently closing the final files of a busy day. Her phone buzzed with a single text from Naomi Bell. "Lena, you have triumphed, but more importantly, you've transformed how people perceive power and human worth." Lena smiled softly, looking out the window. She recalled her toughest moments, when everything seemed beyond her endurance. Now she knew those trials had been worth it, because they led to today's profound and meaningful outcome. A year after that seismic event, Lena Carter was recognized as one of the most influential leaders in both the business world and society at large, not just for her commercial successes, but above all for the powerful message she steadfastly upheld: that respect and dignity can never be replaced by any material gain. As for the Blackwoods, after months of painful restructuring, they began to emerge slowly from the crisis's shadow. Yet everyone understood they had permanently lost the unconditional trust society once gave them. The price they paid was not in money or reputation alone, but in a hard-won awakening to a vivid lesson about character and self-respect. Julian Blackwood, now more discreet and avoiding the media spotlight, quietly contributed to charitable organizations. Perhaps at last he was beginning to grasp the true meaning of respect and humility. Yet he also knew the road to regaining the respect of those he'd hurt would be long and fraught with challenges. Meanwhile, Lena continued to inspire countless young people, especially women of color, striving to claim their true worth. She had become the embodiment of integrity, self-respect, and dignity, a living testament that no matter how harsh the world may be, human dignity cannot be defeated as long as we hold firm to our principles and beliefs. And so, Lena Carter's story transcended that of a powerful businesswoman standing up to insult. It became a profound lesson on the true nature of power and success. The genuine power lies not in money or social standing, but in the ability to preserve one's self-respect, ethics, and dignity through every storm life brings. What about you? Have you ever faced a similar choice between preserving your dignity and pursuing material gain? Share your story in the comments below. If you found this story meaningful, please share this video, and subscribe for more inspiring stories in the future. Thank you for joining us.